Yep. And so there were, hundreds of rumors going on in the last couple weeks about Jim Harbaugh. He was eyeing a return to the NFL. Then Chris Ballas came out and said that a contract has already been signed, 3-year contract. And so it was every media member that I talked to and any source that I talked to at Michigan had completely different things to say. So I even had one source who was a very good source say that nope, no contract was signed. They're actually going to part ways with him and this week and then go for Matt Campbell. And now it comes out. So John Bacon, best-selling author and the guy who was all over the Harbaugh hire back in 2015, now came out last night and said that Michigan has offered Jim Harbaugh a 3-year contract. It is for a significant less amount of money, but there are incentives in there for him to win football games. And so there's also a better buyout, I believe, than what they have, what he has right now. So they're looking at it as, hey, Jim, this is it. We still think you could be the guy for the job, but not at $7 million a year, plus some with his incentives and bonuses and things like that. So it's essentially, a 3-year contract is essentially a 3 1-year contracts with the buyout incentives and buyout clauses and things like that. I think that they're saying, Jim, we'll give you 3 years for recruiting purposes here, so it looks better to everyone else. But essentially, in 2021, if we're in the same spot, or even at an 8-5, 9-4 type of season, with another loss to OSU, we probably will move on. But it does sound like everything is in Jim Harbaugh's court now, that the administration has offered this deal, and now Jim Harbaugh has a decision to make, because John Bacon also reported that he has gauged interest from 5 different NFL teams to be a head coach next year. So there was no specification on who. There really wasn't even a specification on head coach, or if it was a coordinator type deal or anything else. But it does sound like he does have interest from the NFL. So now Jim Harbaugh, in the middle of Michigan-Ohio State week, which 30-point spread, not that important, I guess, this year as important as it has been in past years. Still pretty big game where you'd think you'd want your head coach to be focusing on beating your rival. He's now apparently in contract negotiations behind the scenes, and Michigan's really hasn't said anything about it. So it's been all just reported by sources and insiders.
We also have where there is smoke, there is typically fire. And as you pointed out to me, the coach's news conference was canceled Monday, moved to Tuesday, canceled Tuesday, and it has not been rescheduled as of right now.
Yeah, so that's the other part of all this, is that Michigan, Harbaugh has his normal Monday presser at noon every Monday following the game, and obviously they didn't have a game last week, and then also had COVID outbreaks, so they canceled Mondays because I think they were trying to figure out, at least everybody thought they were trying to figure out practice plans. What do we do? We're trying to figure out how to get a game going on Saturday. So they rescheduled for today. It was supposed to be an hour-and-a-half press conference with both coaches and players. And then about 20 minutes prior to the press conference, the administration sends out an email to media saying press conference canceled today. They haven't said what they will make it up later today or after today or anytime later this week. So like you said, what does that mean? Does that mean that he is trying to get a deal done behind the scenes? Does that mean he's still making his decision? I mean, what it really means to me is he doesn't want to face the questions, obviously. And Michigan's their PR team is saying, yes, this all broke late last night. We don't want to put our coach out in the middle of Ohio State. We can make him answer contract questions, which is fair. But at some point, you got to get in front of the story. Like I said to you, there's the saying that don't make a one-day story into a 2-day story. Well, now you're going on, 72 hours with all these rumors and, beyond. It's been weeks, it's been months that Michigan's been talking, or people have been talking about the contract extension. Will they keep him? Will they go for Matt Campbell, Luke Fickell? The list goes on and on.
Well, I will give the administration some credit for and this is their job, so that they are exploring different options as opposed to the rest of us who I had not heard those type of, and now that it's been presented, it seems both reasonable and again an option to evaluate his performance year to year, and to, instead of just basically saying the contract's up at the end of 2021 and the rest of us, most of us were saying either, you know, get rid of him at the end of this year, or 2021's the hot seat year, meet these standards or else you're gone. They certainly have a huge investment there. They obviously favor him in some regard because they would like to keep him and make things work. And he did perform well to a certain degree to get this to a certain level. And then it's regressed here in the last 2 to 3 years. Very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, I think it's the conundrum of Jim Harbaugh, right? Because he is, Michigan since 2004 has had 7 10-win seasons. And Jim Harbaugh has 3 of those in the last 6 years. So he's had 10 wins in 3 years out of it, in half his seasons, which at most places would be really, you'd be, getting a raise, getting a new contract extension, everything else. But at Michigan, when the Big Ten championship and beyond is the goal, and, Jim Harbaugh has won those 10 games, but he's lost the wrong games. He's lost the games, obviously, all to Ohio State. He's only 3-3 against Michigan State with a terrible loss this year. And it's also the way he's lost games. I believe it was in his first 32 games, he was 24-9 or something like that, or 26-7, something like that. And then in the last 35, he's like 24-14 with 11 of those as double-digit losses. So it's the way he's losing to his rivals. He's losing in games that Michigan does not look competitive in. And then obviously they're on a downward trend this year. And I think there's also something to say, they said it in San Francisco, they said it in Stanford. He wears people out. When he doesn't win all the time, he just does wear on people because of the personality of Jim Harbaugh. And so he looks different, like we talked about earlier this year on the sideline. He looks a little defeated. So it's hard to tell what's going on behind the scenes, if he is wearing people out or if he feels like he's done. But it's just it's a weird thing because, when it's been good, it's been really, really good. But then at the end of the year, it doesn't seem to end well. And so it's the way that he's losing. It's the way he's going about this team and this program right now.
Yeah, if you supplanted Michigan and Jim Harbaugh and placed them in other divisions around college football, even in the Big Ten West, or the Big Ten had not been realigned past the leaders and the legends, then maybe we've got a different narrative. But it's about beating Ohio State and ultimately getting to Big Ten championship games and winning those. We don't know what the bar is necessarily unless John Bacon addressed this, meaning that the average fan, really any fan, could care less how much money the head coach is making if he's winning. Pay him the most money in the country if we're contending for college football playoff berths. So if he's making a reduced sum, $3.5–4 million instead of $7 million, but he's still going 8-5, 9-4, and this carries on for a couple of years, and the administration's like, well, we're just paying him $3.5–4 million, but Michigan's losing 4 and 5 games. That's certainly not going to suffice the fan base.
Yeah, I think that you're 100% right. On the financial side, for Ward Manuel, the athletic director, and the rest of the administration, they're looking at this as, they lost a lot of money this year. They're trying to make some of that back, and maybe Jim Harbaugh is the guy, but not at $7 million. But to the fan base, they don't care if it's 7 million, 10 million, 20 million, as long as they get somebody who can win, doesn't matter to them. Right. And so I don't think it's going to appease the fan base or donors or anybody else if Jim Harbaugh is making only $4 million a year, but still goes that 8-5 or 9-4 or something, or even 10-2 with another loss to Ohio State. It's really about that beating Ohio State. And because I think that when it comes down to it, everyone's like, oh, well, Jim Harbaugh has won those. He's been in 10-3 for 3 years out of the 6. But how many Michigan fans were happy at the end of those 10-3 years too? So it's just it's got to take that next leap. So I agree with you. But then when you look at it in the Big Ten, Ohio State over the last 8 years is 73-5. This, Jim Harbaugh, yes, he has an Ohio State problem. So does the rest of the Big Ten and the rest of the country outside of Clemson. So it's like, it's also this thing where you have to have expectations. You want to set standards for Michigan. Yes, you should be at the top of the Big Ten. You should be competing for a Big Ten and national championship year in, year out with the resources that you have, the history that you have, everything else. But Ohio State is just on an unworldly run right now that nobody else, even Nick Saban and Clemson, have really not gotten, they haven't gotten 73-5 in the conference over 8 years plus, So, yes, it's just a tough situation, I think, because Warren Manuel is probably thinking, I don't know, is Matt Campbell going to come in and beat Ohio State? How can you know if that's the case? Maybe he wins some games that he shouldn't. But I just think from a talent perspective, coaching perspective, it's very difficult to get to Ohio State's level at this point in time. And so to set the bar at that, it's tough.
And that's something we touched upon during one of our conversations here in the last couple months, is that most of us can't relate to that because we go to our job, and as long as we get the job done and do it well, we're going to keep our employment, get paid, and things are going to be fine. There's not a competition standard. There's not a competition of we've got 20 salespeople and you better be the best. And if you're not the best, if you're the third best and you're getting your job done at 80% rate, and we think that's excellent, but you're the third best and all eyes are watching you, but you got to be the best. And that best is just insanely good. Then, we really can't. And that's, also our conversation about Jim Harbaugh's appearance, his demeanor on the sideline and elsewhere. And what is that? Where's the fire? It may just be like throwing up his hands saying, and like you said, the 10-3, the first 10-3 was Michigan fans were cheering. The second 10-3 was, man, that's good. Man, it's really frustrating. We should have won that 2016 Ohio State game, but we're there. We're right there. So we're frustrated for this year, but he's the man. And then the next 10-3 was obviously after a couple losses at the end, badly to Ohio State and in the bowl game. And it was like, okay, enough of this. And now the downslide. So like you say, few of us can relate to that type of barometer, that type of bar. And Jim Harbaugh might just be frustrated. Like, what else can I do? I'm doing my best. We've hit a wall. I don't know. I don't have any answers.
Yeah. And I think that it is plausible to say that at this moment in the 6 years that Jim Harbaugh has been here, he's hit his ceiling. He's hit Michigan's ceiling. They were very competitive in 2016. They were competitive in 2018. And so it's just Ohio State's just on that elite level, and Michigan has broken into the good, maybe, great level at times, but they haven't gotten over that hump to the elite level. And so maybe he's hit his ceiling. Maybe that's not even just his ceiling, but it's just Michigan's ceiling right now. If they want to stick with the academic standards that they keep, right? If they want to, be that clean program that everybody talks about, then maybe this is the ceiling. So I think there's definitely something to that where Jim Harbaugh is saying, I've done just about everything I could outside, obviously 2016, there's, 3 inches away from winning that game, and then that changes the whole course of his entire career at Michigan, probably. But I also think, if Michigan had been losing to Ohio State the last 3 years the same way that they did in the first 3 years, this would be a different narrative. If they're losing games in overtime or just by 1 or even 2 scores, and they're competitive and they have a chance to win in the fourth quarter, then it's a different thing. But the talent gap and the gap between Ohio State has been widened since Jim Harbaugh got here. And so that's where I think people really struggle with the Michigan-Ohio State thing.
And nobody's going to feel sorry for a guy that makes $7 million a year and has had the success throughout his career as Jim Harbaugh has. But let's also understand that there's just an inherent advantage being in some places in the country with the talent pool being right there and just pulling from your backyard versus basically in the North before Notre Dame's ascension in the last year to 2 under Brian Kelly. So they've maybe reached Ohio State level. Ohio State's been the lone elite program in the North, and the rest of it's in the South, Texas, California. That's where most of the players are. 40% of the top 300 players are in those 3 states and then in the surrounding areas. So when you've got to pull from other areas of the country, that's always going to be difficult.
Yeah, and I think that there's a couple things to think about with that too, is that Notre Dame, yes, they're on top of the world with their program right now, but before they beat Clemson, I mean, how many great wins did they have in the past 5 years, right? They handpicked their schedule a little bit. They aren't in a conference. They haven't been to a conference title game until, this year because they had to join the ACC. So there's something to that where if Michigan had the same type of schedule that Notre Dame had and didn't have to play Ohio State, they probably are at the 11-1, 12-0, possibly as well. And Jim Harbaugh is able to build things up just the way as that Brian Kelly has. And then Ohio State as well, yes, Ohio State is on another level, but also once they do get to the college football playoff, it's only been 2014 that they actually won that title. So they are, above and beyond in terms of the Big Ten, but on a national level, they haven't shown that they can consistently play with the Alabamas and the Clemsons. And I think those 3 teams are just like on a different level compared to the rest of the entire country, right? But still, they come in and they dominate the Big Ten, and then they get to college football playoff, and not always are they succeeding on that once they get to that level.
Yeah, the one disclaimer I'll make there is we're only talking about 2 losses. We're only talking about 2 games.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm nitpicking at that point, but I mean, I'm a Michigan fan. It's Ohio State week. I got to poke a little bit there because with a 30-point spread, I don't have much else to stand on over here.
Yes, I'm saying that not just in defense of Ohio State, but also the Big Ten. And when people say, "Oh, it's been since 2014," okay, well, 2 games. One was a blowout. One was basically just, razor thin. And that's talking about the entire conference when people say, well, the conference hasn't done anything. Well, it's a college football playoff invitational. It's an invitational. Let's understand that. It's not an objective process where teams are objectively not selected, but just the system determines who's in the playoff. They're selected. So if you're not selected, you can't win.